Up to this point, I've not been a big fan of using routers to make joinery. I do have this small Bosch Colt 1.25 horsepower trim router. I'm going to try to use it for making the mortises here in my rails. I'll be able to practice the mortises on this scrap first. I've gone ahead and laid out the center line where I want the slats to go, then measured to either side for the width of the mortise. And instead of making a complicated jig to make mortises with a router, I'm just going to attempt to use my vise here. Now, one thing I did do was make sure that the front jaw was parallel all along the length. And that's because I'm going to use it as a guide to route the mortises. So I'll get my workpiece set up. I've already attached the plunge base to the router, installed a 1/4 inch straight cutting bit, and I've gone ahead and attached the deluxe router fence. Now, purely by eye, I'm just going to go ahead and center the bit on the workpiece. And this measurement won't matter too much as long as I make sure the face of each workpiece is on the outside. They'll all have a consistent inset, even if it's a little off center. Also, I've already gone ahead and set my depth stop to about 11 millimeters deep. My tenons will be about 9.5 millimeters. So that'll give me a little extra room at the bottom of the mortise. What you're about to see is me using a router for the first time. Okay, well, no, I'm not using a router for the first time. I'm using a router with a plunge base and an edge guide to make mortises for the first time. And you're going to see quite a few mistakes. It can be rough, but I find if I stick with it, take my time, read the manuals, do a little research, everything works out pretty well. So it's a good thing I'm practicing because I'm still learning the finesse of the plunge. You saw me struggle with a couple of over plunges. So obviously I need more practice on making that trigger pull so I get the plunge right. But the mortise looks pretty decent, and it's the depth I want. Okay, I'll now do the next. Maybe I'll do a little better on this one. So I've made a really dumb mistake here. On the very first pass, I had intended to start at this line, go to my first depth stop, and then go to the end of this line. However, I wasn't paying attention and I actually started at this line and went forward. Now I have to do something about that. I'll have to repair that. What I think I'm going to do is go ahead and route out all the way through the end here, and it'll be much easier just to get a long straight piece to patch that in from some scrap white oak rather than trying to match that curve. Okay, I've changed my mind. Originally I was going to cut the tenons on the end of my slats using this shoulder plane and a guide, but I realized the chances of me getting these tenons consistent across all 16 tenons by hand, given my skill set, the chances are probably not good at that. So I'm going to set that aside for now and just use the shoulder plane for the final tune-up. That means I'm going back to my dado stack. I did get a question from someone in the last video about which dado stack I'm using. It's the Oshland Professional Dado Stack, the 6-inch version. I've had this about 4 years and I really like it. I use it all the time. It's held up good. I just keep it in the box that it came in. At the time I bought it, it was a better deal than the Freud stack, and you can see now it's more expensive. Everything has gone up in price, and the Oshland has gone up in price faster. So if I were making this purchase today, I would likely buy the Freud. However, the Oshland I think has an advantage that the Freud doesn't. The Freud chippers are the 2-tooth style, whereas the Oshland has these really nice 5-teeth chippers. I don't know if it's psychological, but in my mind these are just going to work better, and they have worked really well for me. It also comes with a nice array of steel shims and this nice and durable instructions sheet with everything on one page, including a pretty easy to read chart for getting that width. Also, in my last video I had made a mistake in assembling the dado stack. I took the tongued washer and placed it on first, and then I placed this sleeve on, and then I placed the nut on. That is not the way to do it. It's important that the washer with the tongue on it go right next to the bolt so that the vibration won't turn into rotation and unwind the nut. I got away with it, I got lucky, but this is the way it has to be. So I've got all my tenons cut on the table saw, at least enough to put a crisp shoulder all the way around. And I've got my piece with my mortises over here in the bench so that I can periodically test fit these as I shave them down. And I think I have a pretty good system for fitting these tenons. I've double stick taped these scrap pieces onto the workbench so I can firmly hold the workpiece here. That's in lieu of a traditional bench hook. And I just take my block plane, I get it firmly purchased on the tenon, and I take a stroke. I find that about 8 strokes per side gets me in the vicinity. If the piece is a little thin, I might take a little less just in case. It's time to test that. That's nice and snug. If I find that there's any unevenness on the shoulder, I can always come in with the plane and even that up a little bit. That one's fitting nicely. And to deal with the corners, I'm just pressing in with a knife here on the corners just to undercut the fiber slightly here in the corners so I can trim them off with the chisel. And that's so that they fit into the round holes created by the router bit. So I'll finish these up and move on to the next step. For those of you following along with the project, I've got some of the pieces dry fitted. And I've got the uprights staged there next to it. My next step is going to be to tune those tenons to fit in the mortises I've already cut. And then I'll be able to move on to the next steps. Well, that does it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.